All right, so I know you've all been following this whole TikTok thing, right? Like, will it get banned or not? Well, things just got a whole lot more interesting.
Yeah, I've got to say this is one twist I didn't see coming.
Right. Like, who knew a potential ban could lead to, like, some big cultural discoveries and stuff? Anyway, that's what we're diving into today.
Should be fun.
Exactly. So we found this article that's basically looking at how some American users are ditching TikTok and heading over to this Chinese app called Note.
Red Note, huh? Haven't heard much about it.
Yeah, it's like the Chinese version of TikTok, I guess you could say.
Mm,
But the interesting thing is the article points out how this whole shift is leading to some unexpected comparisons between like life in China and life in the US.
okay, I'm intrigued.
Right. So one of the first things the article talks about is this idea of like TikTok refugees,
Yeah.
basically. Americans who are like fleeing TikTok and seeking refuge on Note. What do you think about that, like as an initial reaction?
Well, it's kind of fascinating, isn't it? Like, it's almost like a natural experiment or something. You take away something familiar, and suddenly people are like forced to confront different perspectives and maybe challenge their own assumptions.
Yeah, and the article calls it a cultural awakening,
Huh.
which I think is a pretty spot-on description.
Definitely. And it seems like part of this awakening is that some Americans are realizing, like, hey, maybe we've been getting a bit of a skewed picture of China from Western media.
It's like all those stories about China being this like hostile and oppressive place. Well, some of these American users are going on Note and finding the opposite, like Chinese users welcoming them with open arms.
Yeah, and that really speaks volumes, I think. For years, we've been bombarded with these narratives about China, but now people are having these direct experiences that directly contradict those narratives.
And the thing that seems to be striking people the most is this observation that Chinese users just seem genuinely happy, which kind of goes against that whole image of an oppressed society, doesn't it?
It's a good reminder that happiness is a complex thing, and it can exist even in places that we might perceive as restrictive or whatever. It's easy to make judgments based on limited information. And this whole situation really highlights the need to challenge those preconceived notions.
Absolutely. And it's not just about culture either. This whole thing has an economic angle too. The article talks about how many Americans are shocked by how much cheaper things are in China.
Oh, yeah, like what kinds of things?
Well, they give this example of corn on the cob. Apparently it's like 94 cents a kilogram in China, but here in the US it's like $7.
Wow, that is a massive difference. Why is that?
Well, the article talks about how China heavily subsidizes agriculture to keep food prices low, while in the US it's more of a free market thing. Less government intervention. There's also the whole supply chain efficiency thing and differences in labor costs. I guess it all adds up.
So basically, the price of corn on the cob becomes a window into these bigger economic and political systems.
Exactly. It's not just about the corn. It's about all the choices and factors that go into determining those prices. Anyway, going back to the cultural exchange thing, the article mentions some interesting stereotypes that are being challenged on both sides.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, for one, Chinese users seem to think that Americans are a bit too confident in their freedoms.
Like overly confident.
Yeah, like maybe they're not seeing the whole picture. The influence of corporations and politicians and stuff.
Hmm. Interesting. And what about Americans? What stereotypes are they questioning?
Well, a lot of them are starting to doubt that whole image of China as a repressive and impoverished nation, especially when they see evidence to the contrary. You know?
Yeah, it's like this whole red note thing is forcing people to look beyond those simplistic us versus them narratives and recognize the nuances and complexities of both societies.
And the coolest thing is it's like this totally organic form of diplomacy.
Hmm.
The article actually uses that term, grassroots diplomacy, and I think it's perfect because it's all about people connecting directly and forming their own opinions without all the filters and spin.
Exactly. It's like a breath of fresh air in a world where information is constantly being manipulated and controlled. Just think about the potential here. If
Yeah.
people can have these kinds of open and honest exchanges, imagine how that could impact relations between countries.
It's mind-blowing. So to wrap things up, I think it's safe to say this whole Red Note situation is way bigger than just a new app. It's about questioning assumptions, breaking down stereotypes, and recognizing the power we have as individuals to shape our understanding of the world.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that the world is a far more interconnected and complex place than we often give it credit for.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So here's a thought to leave you with. If a simple app ban can lead to these kinds of eye-opening discoveries, what other assumptions might we be holding on to without even realizing it? What other perspectives are out there waiting to be discovered?
That's a great question to ponder. It makes you wonder what else we might be missing out on when we limit ourselves to just one way of seeing things.
Exactly. So go out there, explore, challenge your own assumptions, and who knows what amazing discoveries you might make.
Sounds like a plan. I'm ready to dive in.
Me too.